What's up, boys and girls? Lambo here, and today's video will be another free MMR Friday video. As a lot of you already guessed, this one will be a ZvZ one because the last two were a ZvT and a ZvP video. So I thought a little bit about what build exactly I want to show in ZvZ, because I think a lot of the all-ins kind of depend on your opponent to work. But I think this is one of the strongest all-ins we have. It's an all-in that I actually made this build in early 2018 for, I believe it was WSG at first. And then I used it in WCS Austin, I think the first time, against Nerdshow, if I'm not wrong. And I might show you guys a little clip of the most famous moment that this build had, which was me beating Cyril after he seemingly was very prepared for it.
But the reinforcements, the extra production, like you said, it seems like a very tall order.
Okay, well, Cyril seems like he wants to defend here. Lambo's gonna go for it immediately. He dives in.
No, I don't think so. He's fighting into a concave of Cyril. The Queens come forward. They don't have that much energy. In fact, none at all for the most part. The supply advantage is in favor of Cyril. Not Army, however. It is mostly the workers, but the reinforcement could be a problem. Now, that being said, the left flank is getting pretty low. The Roaches of Lambo starting to win here. He's got a 12 Army supply. Two Queens still standing.
It's a good start. It's a good start, but he needs more. There's a lot of Roaches on the way. Drones are going to complicate things a little bit as well. More Roaches coming in from the right side, but Lambo dives on top of them.
That speed upgrade on the Roaches is a big deal. The drones are getting in the way. The Queen's starting to get pretty low here, but the Roaches of Lambo still pretty significant. He's up 20 Army supply. The speed upgrade allows him to kind of pick where the fight goes, and the retreat of Cyril is just not there. He's lost all the drones. The equalized here, and the Roaches of Lambo are more. He pushes forward. He might have just done it.
I think 11 drones more was too many, as Lambo is still on top of the Roaches of Cyril, and a German Zerg is going to send us to game 5.
But what the basic idea behind this is, it's a 2 gas, 2 base Roach All. So this is a build that you can do if you go 2 base and your opponent starts with a normal 3 base setup where they take a third hatchery at around 30 supply, which I hope will happen in a lot of scenarios. And you kind of just want to have the right amount of roaches where if your opponent tries to defend the third base, he will just die, no matter what, pretty much. So that's the purpose of this build. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it. And also the reason why it's called Autobahn, or why I'm going to call it Autobahn, I haven't really talked about it, is because it is a build which includes a creep highway. Since you have an early layer, you might as well bring your overlords into a good formation. And because you also want to bring queens with this build, you want to create a creep highway in order to hit the sharpest timing possible. So I'm gonna call it the Autobahn build, or the German Autobahn. Autobahn obviously meaning highway in German. So anyways, let's go into the build specifics. We're starting out with a hatch first at 16. Then we make 3 more drones. This should happen every single time, no matter the matchup. The first drone gets rallied to the mineral line where you only have 1 drone mining. The next drone will get rallied to the gas. You take the gas, so it's a 18 gas, and then a 17 pool. The third drone that gets rallied out will create the pool. Now the first thing that's a little bit different from normal ZvZ is you rally the next 3 drones all into gas, instead of, if this was a normal ZvZ where I would take a third base, I would, for example, pull this drone right now into gas, right? Then we drone again. You do not play 19 or 20 Overlord in ZvZ. The reason we're doing 20 Overlords in other matchups is because we're required to start 4 Zerglings right away, especially against Terran for the Reaper, but also sometimes against Protoss to take a third base right away. Otherwise, we would always go for this 26 Overlord that hopefully everyone at home right now watching always goes for in their ZvZs. So it's at 20 we make another drone. Then the moment the hatchery is done, we make a drone from the natural and an Overlord from the main base. So this is pretty standard stuff. Then the first deviation is the drone that you make from your main base after the Overlord will be rallied to become your second geyser. So we start the second gas at 227 or a 30 supply. At this point, we're just making drones. You do not need to worry about any scouting information. Now, I just want to talk about real quick. Now I obviously see that my opponent is taking a third base at a normal timing. If you're playing 2 base versus 2 base, I do not think you should go for this build because they might just go for a normal roach speed opener with like 41 drones, and our all-in will be an all-in with 30 drones. So that theoretically is just really good for them. If they go for a pressure build that is basically the same but with a couple more drones, they will just naturally hold because of the rush distance. So this build is the strongest on the short maps, so it's the strongest on Submarine and Lightshade. And then the next best map for it would be, I believe, Jagannatha and Oxide. And then the next best would be Death Aura and Romanticide. And then the worst one probably would be Pillars. But the last three I wouldn't really do it on if you're a very high level player. I think if you're a little bit lower MMR, you shouldn't really worry about that. So we're taking this gas, right, with the drone that was early there. Then the moment the queens are done, we start a layer in the main base and an extra queen at the natural. We also start the Evo chamber at around 2 minutes and 40. Now, you basically just start the Evo chamber the moment the creep extends to where you want to place the Evo chamber. This can take a while on some maps. That's why sometimes you need to go for the more central Evo chamber location. I believe on Oxide sometimes the creep doesn't reach, but I'm not 100% sure since I haven't really played against 2 base that much. So what I want to showcase here, this is something that I usually don't always do, but if the Zerglings try to run by, you should block here. Now, my opponent didn't try to run by, but I will assume that a lot of players, especially on lower MMR, will just pray for a mistake and try to run the 2 Zerglings in, which should always be a mistake, but that's completely fine. You can just completely block your ramp with a hold position. The reason I'm doing this on top of the ramp is because the Zerglings might not see it and then might not be able to get out. So they would go to the high ground, try to run in, realize there's a wall, not get by, and they would die. So very important. So we went inject, inject. You saturate the gas as it's done. We start the roach horn at around 2 minutes and 50. And we're just making drones so far. So you don't need to worry about any of the overlord stuff. And with this build, you actually want to go for a purposeful supply block. So you're going to get supply blocked on purpose. So we're going up to 36, and then we're going to make an overlord. We make again the drone from the natural at 35, and then the overlord from the main base. You can make 2 overlords here right away as well. And so what you do with the 2 queens that you have in the wall so your opponent can scout is one makes a creep tumor, the other one goes for an inject. At this moment you don't need to worry about leaving this a little bit open because your opponent can't have Zergling speed yet. Just in case you're being link flooded, by the way, you can also just make a 3rd evolution chamber, or if you see, in general, if you see a lot of early Zerglings, just make a 3rd evolution chamber either as a full wall that you can cancel later once your roaches are out, or try to make a 3rd evolution chamber with like a one square gap where the queen can block it perfectly against Zerglings. So now the idea right now is that we only inject our natural with the same queen over and over again. We do not need the extra larva, so this queen that just spawned, so our 3rd queen, will just hide here. It's not actually gonna inject. The reason this queen is hiding is so our opponent sees that we don't have a queen which isn't spending his energy. Because if our opponent is smart, he can think about, okay, why wouldn't he inject the main base? And this is really one of the only 2 options. The other one would be a Nidus build. So that's why we're hiding this queen right now. So we're just making overlords now, and from this point out, we start roach speed the moment the layer is done. Immediately, and then we just produce roaches and overlords. That's why this build is so easy. So easy to do. At this moment, you can already worry about making the creep highway into your opponent's base. It can be like this if he's taking this 3rd base. This overlord should move a little bit to change it up. You don't want to show your roaches right away because at this point this still just looks like a normal 2 base opening. It looks like any normal 2 base opening where you go roach speed and then you take a 3rd hatch, go for a little bit of a pressure on 3 gas. So you don't want to show your roaches too early because these roaches are not natural. Usually a 2 base player would still be droning. But now around 4 minutes and 20 is when you want to move out. On larger maps you can move out a little bit sooner. So this is the same queen, by the way, that injected over and over again. The other 3 queens have just been saving up energy so they can transfuse during the attack. Now, if your opponent has a relatively large Zergling count here, which is the case for Sortof, then what you're supposed to do is you escort the queens with the roaches that you have right away, and then you just rally the rest of your roaches here, preferably with a second hotkey. And I'm making the mistake here of getting 2 of my roaches caught, so that's a massive mistake. Usually I would always wait for around 5 to then go again. So just rally your roaches here, preferably on an extra hotkey, and then once you have another 5, you start moving out again, like I'm doing now. But I should have done it right away. So now we're basically playing with 2 less roaches. At the moment roach speed and +1 is done, you just engage. Try to hit your transfuses, and preferably this is how it looks in the end. While this is going on, in case your opponent is not dying, just keep making roaches and overlords. Eventually you will start to float a couple of minerals, because you won't have more mineral income than 3-to-1 ratio, so eventually you will be able to start a hatchery and another queen at home. But yeah, the execution, there is nothing really special to it. You just want to jump on your opponent's army and transfuse up your roaches. If he wasn't defending this base, I would have killed the base first and then try to do something. Unless I see that his army is out of position or very small, I would still go for the army. So there's really not that much to the execution. There's a little bit of focus fire with the roaches, letting the queens tank now that they don't have energy anymore. Always kiting away a little bit from the zerglings, so you can kill the zerglings while his roaches might not be shooting. So the zerglings don't get too much tanking done, and GG was called. As you can see, I have a hatchery here, and I'm still floating some minerals. That's just how it's naturally gonna go. You don't need to worry about that too much. You can just, and now I would start an extra queen, and eventually with the extra minerals you can start more drones, resuming drone production. But usually this build is designed to kill your opponent. So this was the first replay. I'm gonna show another replay that looked a little bit similar than this. So see you there. Alright, so this is the second replay. This will be a replay where my opponent, Sortof, who by the way, I want to thank him for playing these custom games with me, played Zergling speed skip strategy, where if you see your opponent is going for 2 base, you don't get Zergling speed, so he has more roaches himself. So I just wanted to showcase this to see if he then can try to defend his 3rd base, just to really show the strength of this build. A little bit of a trivia about this build is that I made this in 2018, and today, what I learned today for the first time, because I just asked Sortof, hey, can you help me for a YouTube video, can you just play standard? And he was like, sure. And he said he actually also made this build. He even also made a video on this build himself, but which I was not aware of. Apparently him and Elazer also figured out this build, and their timings were exactly the same that I came up with. So this build is pretty optimized. They also tried to optimize it. I don't know in which tournament games they've played it, but I thought it was pretty funny that those two also made this build together and then came up with the timings that are exactly the same. I actually initially, when I did this today, I thought it was 3 queens, because I didn't actually check my VODs. I just thought I remembered the 3 queens. I remembered the gas timing exactly, but it actually was 4 queens, which is something that I only knew after talking to Sortof about it. So I completely forgot that, because I haven't played 2 base in a while. So let's go through it again. I'm just gonna go over the timings for a second time, pretty much. So we rally this drone into the gas. The 2 queens are done. Bomb, lair, and extra queen. Evo chamber, roach warren, supply block at 36. 2 overlords, a queen, an extra queen, 4th queen. We just keep injecting with this queen. So just to show that this queen is only ever injecting. And this will also the queen that will be here in the end. At this point we're just making roaches, and as you can see in the production tab already, our opponent is not going for Zergling speed this game, so he has a couple of extra resources. Well, it's actually this queen that's only going to inject. Either way, they have the same energy, right? So you also don't want to lay down any extra creep tumors. The transfuses are very, very crucial. Do this. And again, I'm moving out now. I see that there's an overlord that's a little bit exposed, so I'm chasing after it. And then we just start engaging. If your opponent doesn't have Zergling speed, the one thing that's different is that you don't need to worry about running around before your queens are there, because you will never get caught. There's 0% chance that your opponent has an earlier roach speed than you. That's simply impossible, unless he would have went lair before queen and then still went for a 3rd base, which I guarantee will not happen a single time. So since they don't have Zergling speed, they have nothing to catch up to you. So you can check how the defense looks exactly, and in this case I actually found a couple of exposed Ravagers. And now that the Queens are here, the Transfuses are here. And you want to always avoid the Spinecrawler with this if you can. So if the Spinecrawler was here, I would have focus fired it down, obviously, that's why he had to place it here. But if I see the Spinecrawler here, I try to make the fight happen over here. So he's reburrowing it now. And since you have the Roach speed, you can just jump on top of your opponent's Roaches. And the execution looks pretty similar to the game before, right? I try to not fight in the range of this. This is really the only difference. And as you can see, I make sure that my Roaches don't just randomly run in here. He pulled the drones, barely not being able to defend it, so that was a decent try. He also cancelled his lair, so he's not even that far ahead in tech, right? But he's behind in tech actually, so he needs to survive with a higher drone count. That just goes to show how powerful this build is. Our opponent this game didn't go for Zergling speed himself, he just made Roaches, he just got the one upgrade, he didn't even make a lair, and he still died against it, so yeah. And now I just want to show a third scenario. This is what I think can also happen, which is what happens if my opponent sacrifices his third base and starts making Spinecrawlers on 2 base. So let's get into that. Alright, so now we're in the third replay. And this one was actually one of the initial ones we played. I didn't really want to replay this because this is mostly about the idea, not about the build order itself. So I'm gonna lack a queen here. Either way, the idea is the moment you realize your opponent is sacrificing his base, you want to kill his structures that are in the wall. Which they should always have, by the way. Otherwise, if there's no wall, you can just go and try and kill him. But if there is a wall, which there should be, because they should be afraid of like a fake wall off and link pressure. So all the good players will have a wall off here. You want to pick off the upgrade first, which I actually make a mistake this game. Then the Roach Warren. And the moment you realize that you want to resume drone production, very, very important. And there is one main idea behind this. Here comes the Autobahn again. For the Roaches. So the main idea behind making drones right away is you can actually just freely do whatever you want now, because you're always going to be able to kill your opponent's Roach Warren before his Roach speed is done. So he can never move out. So it doesn't matter if you have way less Roaches than your opponent, no one's ever going to move out with the Roach speedless Roaches against the guy with +1 Roaches, right? And preferably you would also want to kill the +1. I did this very poorly, so I didn't attack this Evo Chamber right now for some reason. But yeah, basically, I got a third hatch, I get the extra queen. These 2 queens should go back already, but they can also try to hunt down for Overlords, which I think would also be cool. And then what I'm going to do this game is I will go for the Spire. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, we know that our opponent can attack us. 2, we know that we're gonna get the gases on our third base earlier than our opponent, because it will be very hard for him to re-expand, since we usually will have still more Roaches left over than him. And like, he's relying on his spines right now, correct? So in order for him to re-expand, it's gonna take him a while, which means you should be able to get the gas income advantage if you're playing Muta versus Muta. So that's the idea behind going Mutas. You guys can also just start +2 and play a macro game from this. It's completely acceptable as well. You guys can also go for double Evo Chamber. You guys can get Overlord speed and Overseer to scout exactly what's going on. A lot of different stuff you can do. Anyway, I should have been a little bit longer here to deny the space. I actually got very scared because I saw a lot of Zerglings. I will see I think it's right here, where he starts moving down the ramp here. So I'm going into my vision, and you saw that I saw a couple of Zerglings here, and I started extra Roaches here, which I should not have done. But what I thought was happening is, I thought my opponent was trying to go for some Ravager Lingolin for some reason, but he actually just made links to balance out his mineral income with his gas income because he wanted to go for Mutas himself. Either way, I should not have really been that afraid to make extra Roaches, because I know my opponent can't even have a Carapace upgrade if I just clicked on his unit, since I killed the Evo Chamber as well, and I saw that there was nothing researching. So I was a little bit overly worried, but basically the idea is you just make these gases. I even got this extra Evo chamber because I was so afraid of a Ling Ravager attack. So I misread the situation. The reason I'm going for a carapace, by the way, instead of +2 missile is that I just want my roaches to be alive, because what will happen to be alive longer. In pure roach versus roach, by the way, the carapace upgrade does exactly the same as the missile upgrade, or is just as important rather, because it makes you survive one more shot always, whereas both the missile +1 and +2 will always make your roaches take one less shot to kill your opponent's roaches. So the math there in pure roach versus roach is that the carapace upgrade isn't actually much worse than the attack upgrades. In this case, it's actually better because it will make the fights go longer, which is exactly what you want in a roach Mira versus roach fight. So let's say Sortof would have volunteered me right now with a roach Ravager. These roaches eventually would be able to stay alive a little bit longer and allow the Mutas to do more damage, which will in that case turn the fight for my favor. So now I realize it's Muta versus Muta. Sortof already has the carapace upgrade on the way, but we're mining way more gas in him, so he needs to do something. So we're gonna see him attack. And we're able to just kill it, and we're just ahead in Mutas already by a little bit too much, so he's gonna end up leaving the game. And GG. So that's just one of the ways you can follow it up. You can also just play standard. I just wanted to make sure that you guys are not afraid to drone up right after, because as long as you kill your opponent's Roachborn before he has speed, he doesn't really have any opportunities to move out on the map. So I just wanted to cover that scenario really quick, because that's in most scenarios this will be the only case where you're not actually just gonna straight up kill your opponent. So I wanted you guys to know what to do afterwards. Either way, let's get to the rating part, which I always do, to see how free the MMR really is of this build. And I thought about it a little bit, and I think this build will be a 2 out of 5 on the difficulty scale, because you can apply it very simply, and you don't really need to worry about any all-ins from what your opponent is doing. You just basically have one condition, that is, you see, does my opponent have a third base? And then you just execute the build. The build is not very hard to execute. It's pretty much just not getting supply blocked. The only reason I made it at 2 and not at 1.5 is because you gain supply very early. So I actually think a lot of players will have problems with supply blocks with this build. And you need to remember a couple of timings very quickly in the early game. So that's why I didn't want to make it a 1.5. That, as well as remembering to spread the overlords correctly and spread the creep, and then the execution can become a little bit hard if there are a lot of links out. So if you want to rally your roaches in the natural, you saw even I made a mistake there, so it's not super simple, but I still want to give this overall a 2 out of 5. I think this will win you guys a lot of games pretty easily. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I just want to give a massive shout out to Sortof, who helped me here with the custom games, and also reminded me that actually I used to always make a 4th queen, and he also made a 4th queen with his build. I don't know who made this build first, Sortof and Elazer or me, so I don't want to completely claim it, but since at this moment in time, all we really need to do to claim a build is give it a good name. I thought let's just call it the Autobahn from now on, and at this point it just becomes my build, so that was pretty much my thought process. Make sure to also check out Sortof's YouTube channel. He's just called Sortof on YouTube. You can simply search him. He also has a great channel. And yeah, that's it from me for today. See you guys in the next video, and take care.